Under an obsidian sky, the stars of truth shine brighter than they ever could during the light of day. Join our nighttime journey through the mysteries of the soul and the secrets of the universe. Subscribe today and let the darkness reveal the light you've searched for. Orchestrated fresh memoir narrative avoiding forbidden names. Restructured plot mechanics. Ensured emotional consistency. Orchestrated fresh memoir narrative avoiding forbidden names. Restructured plot mechanics. Ensured emotional consistency. My name is Sloane Hartley. I'm 31 years old. 4 years ago, my daughter's heart was failing in a hospital 200 miles from our house, and I needed $54,000 in 6 days to keep the one surgeon who could fix it. I called my mother 19 times in a single afternoon. My father answered once, then sent me a photograph of the ocean. My brother told me to be reasonable and to call my husband's family instead. That Thursday, the three of them boarded a cruise ship out of Fort Lauderdale. I didn't speak to a single one of them again until this past spring, when my brother flew into Cincinnati with a leather folder under his arm and one sentence that turned my stomach to ice. Mom and Dad made sure you'd never touch a dime. What he didn't know was that I had kept everything. Every voicemail, every text, the photo of that ocean, caption and all. And what he found out in the next 20 minutes cost him far more than he ever came to take. I want to start with the Tuesday, because the Tuesday was ordinary, and that's the part that still gets me. It was March, and our furnace had been making a sound like a dying lawnmower, and my husband Wesley had taken the morning off to look at it before his shifts started. He's an HVAC tech. He can fix almost anything in a house except, it turns out, the things that matter. Our daughter Hazel was 3. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her dinosaur pajamas, eating dry Cheerios with her fingers because she decided that week that spoons were for babies. And I remember thinking she had a milk mustache from the night before that she wouldn't let me wipe off. She had a cough. Just a cough. Daycare crud, I figured. She'd been a little gray under the eyes, a little slow on the stairs, but she was 3. 3-year-olds get sick. By noon, she wouldn't stand up. By 2, she was breathing in this fast, shallow way, her lips going the wrong color. And I had her in the car before I'd even called anyone, driving with my hand on her chest at every red light, like I could hold her together that way. The ER doctor came back with the kind of face you learn to read after that day. He used a word I'd never had to know before. Cardiomyopathy. Her heart muscle was enlarged and weak, probably from a virus weeks earlier that we'd never even noticed. And it was failing, and the local hospital was not equipped for what she needed. They transferred her by ambulance to the Children's Hospital downtown, and 3 days later, when she still wasn't stabilizing, a cardiologist named Dr. Mercer sat me down in a family room with bad carpet and told me my daughter needed a specific surgical procedure, and that the surgeon who did it best, who had the best outcomes for kids exactly like Hazel, was at the Halloran Heart Institute in Cleveland, 240 miles away. He could take her in 9 days. He had one slot. After that, 3 months minimum. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Then the woman from billing came in. Her name doesn't matter. She had a folder and a calculator and a smile that was trying very hard. The Halloran Institute, she explained, was out of network on our plan. Wesley's insurance through the contractor he worked for would cover an in-network surgeon here in town. But Dr. Mercer had been clear, and I'd seen it in his eyes, that in-network and the best chance my daughter has were not the same hospital. To hold the Cleveland slot, Halloran required a deposit, $54,000. Our appeal to the insurance company could take 4 to 6 weeks. Hazel had 9 days. I did the math that night in the parking garage so I wouldn't do it in front of her. Our savings, $8,100. That was it. That was the whole cushion of 2 working people, with a kid and a mortgage and a furnace, held together with a prayer. Wesley could pull from his retirement, but after the penalty and the taxes it'd net maybe 6. We had a 2013 Camry that was paid off, worth about $4,500. My wedding ring, if I pawned it, $2,000 if I was lucky. I was already at $20,000, and I was already out of things to sell, and I hadn't even gotten to the part where I had to figure out gas and a hotel in Cleveland, and the days of work neither of us could afford to miss. So I called my parents. I need you to understand that I did not want to call my parents. My father retired from running an orthodontics practice. My mother never worked a day past 35 and never had to. They live in a 4-bedroom house on a golf course in Naples, Florida, with a lanai and a boat they use twice a year. And they have never once been short of money in my lifetime. My brother followed Dad's blueprint exactly. He's a financial advisor in Charlotte, drives a German car, posts photos of his closing dinners. I was the one who married a guy in a work polo and moved back to Ohio and never quite became the daughter they could brag about at the club. We weren't estranged before that week. We just weren't close. There's a difference, and I want to be honest about it, because what happened next wasn't a feud finally boiling over. It was the first real ask of my entire adult life, and they treated it like an inconvenience. I called my mother first. She picked up on the fourth ring, sounding like I'd interrupted something. I told her, fast, all of it. My voice doing that thing where it climbs. Hazel, her heart, Cleveland, the deposit. I said the words she might not make it out loud for the first time, and they came apart in my mouth. There was a pause on the line, and then my mother said, "Oh, sweetheart, that's just awful," in the exact tone she'd use if I told her my flight got delayed. And then she said, "Let me talk to your father. We'll figure something out." She did not say "I love you." She did not ask Hazel's room number. The call was 4 minutes long. I checked, later. I have a habit now of checking. My father texted me 20 minutes after that. "Saw your call from your mom. We'll discuss tonight." In the middle of something. I found out later the something was a dinner reservation. I called 19 more times over the next 2 days. I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not rounding up. 19. I kept a list in my notes app, not because I'm cold, but because I was drowning, and a list was the only thing I could control. Some went to voicemail. A few got declined after 2 rings, which is its own particular kind of cruelty, knowing the phone is in their hand and their thumb is choosing. My mother answered twice and both times promised to talk to Dad and call me back and both times didn't. I left voicemails from the hospital cafeteria at 1 in the morning. "Mom, please. I'm not asking for a gift. I'll sign anything. I'll pay it back the second the appeal clears. The surgeon can only take her Thursday. Please just call me." My brother called me Wednesday. I'd half hoped, when I saw his name, that he was the cavalry. "Hey," he said. "Mom's pretty upset. You've kind of been blowing up her phone." I told him what was happening. He let me finish, which I'll give him. And then he sighed in that way he has, like I'm a spreadsheet that won't balance. "Okay, here's the thing," he said. "You're asking them to come up with 50 grand in cash on 3 days' notice. That's not how their money works. It's tied up. They'd have to sell positions, eat the penalties, and for what a surgery you might get covered anyway once the appeal goes through." "Might," I said. "She might be dead by the time might clears." "Don't be dramatic, Sloane. Kids have heart surgery all the time." I could hear something behind him, clinking. A low murmur. "Where are you right now?" I asked. "A beat. I'm at lunch." "That's not the point." "You're at lunch." "The point is, why is this Mom and Dad's responsibility? Wesley's got family. Call his parents. Call the hospital. Work out a payment plan. There are options here that don't involve setting Mom and Dad's retirement on fire." I remember standing in that cafeteria with the phone hot against my face and feeling the exact moment something inside me went quiet. Not loud, quiet. "She's their granddaughter," I said. "And she'll still be their granddaughter after they get back," he said. They've had this cruise booked since last summer. 35th anniversary. The deposit alone is $7,500, non-refundable, and they leave Thursday. You want them to throw that away on a problem money won't even solve in time. Be reasonable. Manage your expectations. Then he said the line I will hear in my head until I die. Honestly, this is exactly why people keep their distance from you. I hung up. I didn't slam it. I just took the phone away from my ear and ended the call and stood there. I called Wesley's mother that night. She cried. She and his dad live on Social Security and a small pension in a double-wide outside Knoxville, and she wired me $5,000 the next morning, which I later learned was every cent in their checking account, and she apologized that it wasn't more. I think about that a lot. The people with the least gave me everything. The people with the most sent me a calculator's worth of reasons. I pawned my ring, $2,100. I listed the Camry that night and a guy paid $4,500 cash on Friday morning before I'd even had coffee. I started a GoFundMe at midnight, wrote the description 4 times, deleted 3. Finally just told the truth my baby's heart. The surgeon in Cleveland. The clock and posted it to Facebook for the 190 people I half knew. A mom from Hazel's daycare shared it. Then a local reporter shared it. By Saturday night, it had $9,400 in it from strangers who will never know what they did. I was still short. By my count, after the savings and the retirement and the ring and the car and Wesley's parents and the GoFundMe, I had about $35,000. I needed 54. I was $19,000 and 3 days away from losing the slot. Monday morning, my mother answered on the 3rd ring. I could hear a suitcase zipper. I am not making that up. The actual sound of a zipper. "Sloane, honey, I feel terrible," she said. "I do. But your father and I can't keep being your safety net." "One," I said, very slowly. "Have you ever been my safety net?" "You know what I mean. We gave you money for the wedding." "That was 4 years ago and it was $3,000. You gave him $60,000 for the down payment on his condo. Your brother is responsible with money. He paid us back." A pause. "We'll check in when we're home. The ship doesn't have great reception. Try to stay calm, sweetheart. Panic doesn't help anyone. Everything has a way of working out." She hung up. That afternoon, a financial counselor at the Children's Hospital sat with me for an hour and walked me through their charity care program, something I hadn't known existed, because no one tells you these things until you're at the bottom. With our income and Hazel's diagnosis, we qualified for a hardship grant that covered the network gap. And Halloran, once they had the grant letter and a payment plan signed in my own blood for the remainder, held the slot. Wesley drove to Cleveland that night to be there for the pre-op. I followed the next morning with Hazel and a cooler of her favorite snacks. She was too sick to eat. That evening, in a Holiday Inn off I-71 with my daughter asleep in the next bed and surgery 12 hours away, my email pinged. My father. Subject line. Your situation. I still have it. I could recite it. He wrote that he and my mother had been talking and that they felt I wasn't seeing the bigger picture. That they'd worked their whole lives for this trip. That when you have children you sacrifice everything. And they'd done that for my brother and me. And now that they were retired, they finally got to live for themselves. That asking them to lose $7,500 on a cruise was, his word, selfish. That Wesley's insurance and the appeal would sort it out. That I'd be fine. I was always so resourceful. That they'd send me $500 when they got home, for groceries or whatever the baby needs. There was an attachment. I shouldn't have opened it. I opened it. It was a photo of the two of them at the ship's railing at golden hour. My mother in a coral sundress with a drink in her hand. My father's arm around her. Both of them tan and easy and smiling at whoever held the camera. The caption, which he had not bothered to delete, read, "First night at sea, paradise." My 3-year-old was going under a surgeon's knife in the morning, and my father sent me paradise. I sat in that hotel room, And I wrote back in under a minute. I didn't revise. Don't send the $500. Don't call. Don't write. You chose a vacation over your granddaughter's life, and I am going to remember that every single day I have left. You're not my parents anymore. Enjoy your sunset. I hit send. I blocked his number. I blocked my mother's. I blocked my brother's. I deleted them off Facebook. And then I lay down next to my sleeping daughter, and for the first time in 6 days, I slept. Hazel's surgery took 9 hours. The surgeon, a quiet woman with steady hands, whose name I'd put on a billboard if I could, told me afterward that it had gone as well as she could have hoped, that Hazel's heart was responding, that the next 48 hours mattered most. I sat in the pediatric ICU and watched the numbers on the monitor and held 2 of her fingers through the rail of the crib because that was all of her I could reach. And when she squeezed back, just a reflex, I know that. Now it felt like she was telling me to hold the line. She held it. She came home 11 days later on a fistful of medications and a follow-up schedule that ran for years. She was small and pale, and her chest had a scar down the middle that her swimsuits would always have to account for. But she was alive, and she was mine, and the people who hadn't shown up were already strangers. The cruise, by the way, was 12 days. They posted the whole thing. I didn't go looking, but it found me anyway through a cousin snorkeling. A formal night. My mother holding a coconut. My father in a linen shirt at a captain's dinner. They got back, and my mother did send the $500, a Zelle transfer with the memo, for the baby. I sent it back. Same amount, memo blank. I never heard from any of them again. I'd love to tell you I spent the next 4 years, thriving and unbothered. Mostly, I just survived. We refinanced the house to clear the payment plan. I went back to work doing medical billing, of all things. The same maze of denials and appeals and out-of-pocket maximums that had nearly cost me my kid. Except now I knew how to fight it from the inside. I got good at it. I got promoted. Wesley picked up a second certification. We were tired, and we were okay. I kept a shoebox on the top shelf of my closet. The cruise email, printed. The call logs, screenshotted. Every voicemail saved to a thumb drive. I told myself I kept it for no reason. I knew that was a lie. I kept it because some part of me had decided that if they ever tried to tell the story differently, I would have the truth in a box. Hazel turned 7 this past March. She does competitive jump rope, which her cardiologist cleared and which terrifies and delights me in equal measure. She reads above her grade. She asked me once, when she was 5, why she didn't have a grandma and grandpa like her friend down the street. And I said she did, in Tennessee. Daddy's folks, and they loved her to pieces. She said, "What about your mom and dad?" And I said, "It's complicated, baby." And she accepted that the way kids accept things, and went back to her jump rope. Then this past April, on a Tuesday, again. It's always a Tuesday. My phone rang from a number I didn't know. Charlotte area code. I almost let it go. I picked up. Sloane, don't hang up. It's your brother. 4 years of nothing, and his voice in my ear like he'd called the day before. I didn't say anything. There's been an accident, he said. Mom and Dad. Their car went off the road outside Asheville 2 weeks ago, coming back from the mountains. Neither of them made it. I'm sorry, I should have called sooner. I didn't know how. I looked across the kitchen. Hazel was at the table doing a worksheet, humming. "When are you calling me?" I said. "Because there's an estate, and because there are things I need to tell you in person. I'm flying into Cincinnati Friday." I should have said no. I said okay. I don't fully understand why, except that I think I wanted to see his face when I refused whatever he was bringing. That night I looked up the obituary. He'd written it, or paid someone to. It listed their golf club, and their boat, and their 35 years of marriage, and their devoted son in Charlotte. survived by their son. Not their children, not their son and daughter, just their son. They had erased me from the record of their own deaths, and somehow, after everything, that was the thing that knocked the wind out of me. They went to their graves having decided I didn't exist. We met at a diner off the highway, the kind with laminated menus and bottomless coffee. I got there early and sat where I could watch the door. He walked in 10 minutes late in a suit that cost more than my first car. Grayer than I remembered. Softer in the middle. He raised a hand. I didn't raise mine back. He sat down across from me and set a leather folder on the table between us like a peace offering or a weapon. "You look good," he said. "What do you want?" He folded his hands. "How's Hazel? I saw she made it. There was a thing in the paper back then." You saw the thing in the paper." My voice came out flat. "And you didn't call." He didn't answer that. He opened the folder instead. The estate, he explained, came to about $1.9 million. The house, the retirement accounts, the investments, the cash. There was no will on file with the attorney. Under Ohio law, with both of them gone and no surviving spouse, it split 50-50 between their 2 children. "You're entitled to half," he said. "Roughly $950,000. I said, "I don't want it." "Don't be stupid. That's life-changing money. Hazel's medical bills alone, college, you'd never worry again. We're fine. You're a billing clerk in a rented—" He caught himself. "I'm trying to help you here." "Then why," I said, "do you care whether I take it? If I refuse, you get all of it. So why drive a folder across the country to tell me about my half?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he flipped to a page deeper in the folder and slid it across. It was a will, dated and notarized 11 days after the week I cut them off. Last will and testament. I read Article 4. They left their entire estate to my brother, and then, in language I'm certain the lawyer cleaned up but a parent dictated, "Our daughter is intentionally excluded from any inheritance due to her unreasonable conduct and her refusal of all reconciliation." I read it twice. Unreasonable conduct. They wrote that into a legal document while I was sleeping in a Holiday Inn praying my child would wake up. "So why am I here?" I said. "If this exists, you already have everything." "Because it was never filed," he said. "It was in Dad's safe. I found it after the accident. Legally, if I don't submit it to probate, it doesn't exist. Without it, you get your half automatically." He paused. "And I'm not sure that's right." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're not sure it's right. I was wrong, okay? Back then. I didn't know how bad it was. I thought you were exaggerating. I told you her heart was failing. I told you there was a surgeon and a deadline. What part of that did you decide was an exaggeration over your lunch?" He didn't answer. He turned to the last section instead and slid one more document across the table. "And this is the one that did it. This is the one that did it. This is the one that took whatever was left of the grief and burned it clean off. It was an irrevocable trust, funded with $400,000, my brother as sole beneficiary, and the date it was created and funded, I had to read it 3 times, was the day after Hazel came home from the hospital. The week the local paper ran its little follow-up story, Cincinnati toddler home after heart surgery, community rallies. There was a note in the trust paperwork, a purpose line. Established to provide for our responsible child, daughter estranged following her unreasonable demands during a family disagreement. They knew, I said. My voice was very quiet. She survived, it was in the paper. And the next day, they didn't call to say thank God. They called a lawyer to make sure I'd never get a cent of theirs. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. And you have that $400,000. It paid out to the trust when they passed, yes. So you have $1.3 million between the trust and your half of the estate, And you flew here to get me to sign away my 950 so you could have the whole 1.9. And you brought the will to make sure I knew you could bury me if I said no. I leaned back. That's not a peace offering. That's a threat with table manners. He had the decency to flinch. Then he pushed one final sheet across the table. A waiver of inheritance rights with a pen clipped to it and a little notary stamp he'd thought to bring, because of course he had. Here's what I'm offering, he said, and his voice slid back into the smooth register I remembered from 1,000 holiday dinners. You sign this. You give up your claim. I keep everything, which, let's be honest, Dad and Mom clearly wanted. You walk away clean. No fight, no lawyers, no court record. Nobody ever has to know you cut off your dying parents and refused their help and broke this family. Because that's how it'll read, Sloane, if you make me file that will. You'll be the villain. And someday, Hazel will be old enough to look it up and find out her mother chose pride over family. I sat there and I looked at the pen. I want to be honest, because the comments on these things always say nobody hesitates, and that's not true. I hesitated. $950,000 is a paid-off house, and a college fund, and Hazel's medications covered for life, and never once again lying awake doing math in a parking garage. I thought about all of it. For about 10 seconds, I genuinely thought about signing, just to be done, just to never have to be in a room with him again. And then, I thought about the caption, Paradise, and the obituary, survived by their son. And the trust funded the day after. My daughter came home. Like the news of her living had been the thing that finally spurred them to action, not to celebrate, but to disinherit. I pushed the waiver back across the table, unsigned. I'm going to file a contest, I said. Tomorrow. I'll argue the will was the product of undue influence. Your influence, you sitting in their ear in 2021 telling them I was irrational, telling them to take space. I have those texts, by the way. You texted me, this is why people keep their distance from you. I kept it. His face was changing now. The color going out of it. I have the call logs. 19 calls in one afternoon. I have the voicemails. I have the email Dad sent me from the ship with the picture of the ocean and the word selfish in it, sent the night before my 3-year-old had open-heart surgery. I can prove I begged. Can you prove they ever picked up? Sloane. And I'm going to have my attorney take a hard look at that trust. A purpose line that lies about why I was estranged, funded by people deliberately concealing assets from an heir that's not airtight. That's a thread, and I am going to pull it in open court, with the local paper sitting right there, the same paper that ran the story about the community that saved my kid when her own grandparents wouldn't. We can negotiate, he said fast. I could 200,000 from the trust, just to make this go away. I don't want your money. And I realized as I said it that it was true. I want you to sit in a deposition and explain, under oath, where you were the day I called. I want a judge to read that email out loud. I wanted, on the record, the real record, not the obituary you wrote that, when I needed help to keep my daughter alive, the 3 of you went to a captain's dinner. You're doing this for revenge, he said. I stood up and put cash on the table for my coffee, because I wasn't going to owe him even that. No, I said. I'm doing it for the record. There's a difference. I filed the next morning. I'd love to tell you it went to a dramatic trial, but it didn't. And I'm glad, because the audience for drama isn't the audience I cared about. A 7-year-old was. My attorney sent the discovery requests, the call logs, the voicemails, the texts, the cruise email, the timeline of the trust. My brother's lawyer got the package, sat him down, and ran the math the way our family always ran the math. And the math said that fighting a documented, dated, deliberate disinheritance with a fraudulent purpose line in front of a jury that would absolutely include parents and grandparents, was a catastrophically bad bet. He settled in 6 weeks. I got my full share, $948,000, after the dust cleared, and a signed acknowledgement, which I insisted on and which cost him nothing but which I framed, that the original will had been withheld and the estrangement language was false. I spent $9,200 on my attorney to get there, worth every dollar. I paid off the house. I set up a trust for Hazel, a real one, the kind that's about a kid and not about punishing one. I covered her medications and her cardiology appointments through adulthood. And then, I took $54,000, the exact number, down to the dollar, and I gave it to the Children's Hospital Charity Fund. The one that caught us when my own blood let us fall. The fund that means the next mother doing math in a parking garage at midnight gets to keep her kid without begging anyone for anything. My brother and I don't speak. I don't expect we ever will. I don't lie awake about it. Last week, Hazel was on the back patio with her jump rope, counting out loud, her scar just visible above the neckline of her tank top in the late sun. She stopped to catch her breath and looked over at me on the step and asked, out of absolutely nowhere the way she does, "Mom, are we rich now?" I thought about how to answer that. "We're okay," I said. "We don't have to worry." "Good," she said, and picked the rope back up. "I just like it when you're not on the phone being sad." I hadn't realized she'd noticed, all those years ago, that I used to be on the phone being sad. Kids notice everything. They just file it for later. I'm not the woman who got on a ship while her granddaughter's heart was failing. I'm not the man who flew across the country with a folder to take what wasn't his. They thought they could write me out with a notary and a purpose line and erase me with an obituary and call it the truth because there'd be no one to argue. But I kept the box on the top shelf of my closet for 4 years, and when they came to rewrite the story, I had the receipts. I'd take that over their money any day. As it happens, I got both. And when Hazel is old enough to ask the real questions, I won't have to make anything up. I'll just hand her the box and let the truth speak in their own words. The thing I keep coming back to is that nobody in my family was a monster. They were just people who decided, a long time before that week, that being comfortable mattered more than being good. And once you make that trade often enough, it stops feeling like a choice. My father didn't twirl a mustache when he sent me that photo of the ocean. He genuinely believed he'd earned his paradise, and that my daughter's failing heart was, somehow, my failure to plan. That's what scared me most. Cruelty that thinks it's reasonable doesn't feel cruel from the inside. I learned that you can't control whether the people who are supposed to love you actually show up. I couldn't make my mother answer the phone. I couldn't make my brother put down his fork at lunch. What I could control was who I chose to be while they were busy choosing themselves. And I think that's the whole thing, really. When I had nothing left to sell, and $19,000 still to find, I didn't get to decide the outcome. I only got to decide that I would keep calling, keep fighting, keep my hand on Hazel's chest, at every red light. The grit to keep going when the math says stop is not something you're born with, you build it one impossible afternoon at a time. But grit alone would have just made me a tired woman who lost everything with dignity. What actually saved us was paying attention. The hospital had a charity fund the whole time, and I only found it because I stopped panicking long enough to ask the right person the right question. I kept the call logs and the voicemails and that email with the word selfish in it, not because I was plotting, but because some quiet part of me understood that the truth is only powerful if you can prove it. 4 years later, when my brother slid a waiver across a diner table, that shoebox on my closet shelf was worth more than the $900,000 he was trying to take. And here's the part I'd want my daughter to understand someday. I didn't fight him for revenge. Revenge would have been signing nothing and posting the cruise photo on mine and burning his name down. What I wanted was the record set straight. The lie about my unreasonable conduct struck from a legal document. The obituary's silence answered. There's a line between justice and spite, and you only stay on the right side of it if you keep asking yourself, honestly, which one you're after. I asked myself that question 100 times. I think I mostly got it right. The money paid off our house and covered Hazel's heart for the rest of her life. And then, I gave away the exact amount I'd once begged for, because the people who saved us were strangers. And I wanted to be a stranger like that for somebody else. My parents tried to erase me with a notary and an obituary. They didn't know I'd been keeping the truth in a box the whole time. Goodness, when no one's watching, is the only thing that was ever really mine to keep.